Alright, in the last video I explained the 12-year regency. I have 12 years penned in here, or penciled in, between the end of the reign of Amaziah, who reigned 29 years, and the beginning of the reign of Uzziah. So this period is a 12-year regency, I explained, that had been omitted by Josephus and Ashur and Tiglath. Now we want to explain how the Assyrian chronology lines up. So we're going to go to the last point in time where the Assyrian chronology, the Assyriologists agree with the biblical interpretation, and their Assyrian chronology agrees with the Assyriologist version of their own chronology. So basically, this is a point in time where everyone can agree to within a year or two. And we have a session year, his first year, and the second year, 720 BC. And we have over here the reign of Hezekiah of Judah and the reign of Hoshea of Israel. The scripture gives us a synchronism. It says in the 6th year of Hezekiah and in the 9th year of Hoshea is when the northern kingdom fell. And this corresponds to 720 BC. This date can vary depending on which chronologist you look at. Some could have up to 723 BC for this date. But as we still see in the discrepancy between the biblical chronology and the Assyrian chronology, this is going to turn out to be peanuts, because the discrepancy will add up to 52 years. So little variations like this aren't going to explain the difference. Okay, so if we start at a base year of 720 BC, and the 6th year of Hezekiah and the 9th year of Hoshea, then we can roll backwards here. We can go back to the 1st year of Hezekiah, right here, which would be in 724 or 725 BC. 725 is here, 724 is here. So backing up 6 years, or five more, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we come to 724. And as we see here, the 1st year of Hezekiah is inclusively counted as the same year as the last year of King Ahaz, his father. This inclusive counting frequently occurs in chronology, and it is well accepted. Now we go back. The reign length of Ahaz was 16 years. So we can go back 16 years. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which corresponds to 739 BC. And then the reign length of his father, Jotham or Jotham of Judah, was also 16 years. So we can go backwards 16, 15, 14, and so on until we come to the 1st year of Jotham. Now we note that there was a co-regency between Jotham and Uzziah, but those years aren't counted. Typically in biblical chronology, only the years of sole regency are counted. And we see that year 52 of Uzziah, his father, and year 1 of Jotham or Jotham is counted inclusively again. But we can go back 52 years for the reign of Uzziah. Here we go. Uzziah's reign going backwards to the 1st year of Uzziah. And then we have the 12-year regency I told you about in the last video. And we come back to the 29th year of Amaziah. Amaziah died in the 15th year of Jeroboam II. And we have the 27th year of Jeroboam II when Uzziah came to the throne. We go back 29 years for the reign of Amaziah. And we come to his father, Jehoash, who reigned 40 years. Going back 40 years for the reign of Jehoash, we come to the usurper Athaliah. And her usurpation lasted 6 years. And this brings us parallel to the reign of Jehu, the king of the northern kingdom, northern Israel, or the kingdom of Israel in the north. Okay, we see that this brings us to 893 BC, in the biblical chronology. But now we need to look over at the Assyrian side of the chronology and see what year the Assyriologists would claim this to be. According to Assyriologists and biblical chronologists, they both agree that Jehu sent or paid tribute to Shalmaneser, his 18th year here. Let's find his name. Here it is, Shalmaneser III. Okay, and here's his 6th year, and this corresponds to the Battle of Karkar, right here. 6th year, Battle of Karkar, and the biblical date for that, I'll line this up a little better so I don't make a mistake, 905 BC. Okay, and if we go back to the beginning of Shalmaneser's reign, Assyriologists will claim that that's 859 BC. So let's look at the 18th year again for comparison. Assyriologists will claim that the 18th year of Shalmaneser is 841 BC. But as we see, that's 893 BC. There we go. As we see, that's 893 BC over here. So on the biblical chronology, the usurpation of Athaliah and Jehu in the northern kingdom comes in 893 BC. But according to the Assyriologists, it was 841 BC. Now the difference between these two numbers, between the Assyriological belief and the biblical chronology, is 52 years. So the question is where did 52 years of contradiction happen in the chronology? Was it on the biblical side or was it on the Assyrian side? Well, I can explain to you a couple reasons why it wasn't on the biblical side. You see, this era we explained here as the era of the divided kingdom in the last video adds up to 390 years between the division of the kingdom between Rehoboam and Jeroboam and the date that Ezekiel began his book. It is stated as the 30 years after the 18th year of Josiah. That period is 390 years. If we take the Assyrian version of the chronology, that would be shortened by 52 years and would contradict the 390-year sum, the running sum that was being kept, as I showed in the last video. Also to be contradicted is 70 sabbatical years that were counted up in the sin periods of Judah and Israel. And as you can see, I have some of them right here, 37, 38. If we look at the 12-year regency here, we see that there's a sabbatical year, another sabbatical year, and a year of Jubilee, which need to be counted in the sum. So even by omitting this 12-year regency, as we have shown, not even Ashur can come up with 390 years. Ashur only comes up with 388 years, and Josephus comes up with 361 in the 18th year of Josiah, which is the correct enumeration, but Josephus's chronology cannot explain how he got 361 years. He needs the regency he omitted in order to get it. Also, we have a few other factors that show the biblical chronology is correct. In the 4th year of Ahaz, Isaiah gave a prophecy that said before his son was a certain age, the two kings feared by Ahaz, namely the northern king Pekah and the king of Aram, would be done away with or off the throne. This happened in the 4th year of Ahaz, and in the same chapter of Isaiah 7, it says that in 65 years, Ephraim, which would be the northern kingdom, would be not a people. So this is the 65 years right here. So if we go down to 65 years, this brings us, in the Assyrian chronology, to the 10th year of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria. There's no dispute about the dates here. Esarhaddon invaded Egypt around his 10th year, or in his 10th year, and when he did so, he took Manasseh, king of Judah. This column is Manasseh, king of Judah. He took him in exile to Babylon, and then he restored him the next year. So the the same time, he also deported the northern kingdom of Israel, which comes exactly 65 years later. This interlocks with 40 years for the sin of Judah, which is the first 25 years of Manasseh's reign. And then to complete the 40 years, we have 2 years for the wicked king Ammon. Josiah was a righteous king. And then the balance of the 40 years are in the orange column here, under these wicked kings here. Year 28, 29, down to 40, when Jehoiakim was exiled by the king of Babylon in 597 BC. So these long numbers and interlocking numbers show that Israel's chronology is correct. So the question now is, how do we explain the shortening of the Assyrian chronology? So what I want to do here is I want to work forward in Assyrian chronology. Assyriologists agree the Battle of Karkar was in the sixth year of Shalmaneser III. Okay, and this is when, shortly before Ahab was killed. So here's the reign of Ahab. He reigned 22 years. Okay, and the same Assyriologists agree that in the 18th year of Shalmaneser III, Jehu paid tribute, okay, to Shalmaneser. And we see, according to the Assyriologists, this was in 841 BC, and according to the biblical chronology, this was in 893 BC, a difference of 52 years. So where are we going to find 52 missing or non-existent year names for the Assyrian chronology? I believe, in fact, that these 52 year names never existed. The reason that Assyriologists are so confident in their chronology is that each year the Assyrian king or his court would name an official for the year, and the name of this official would be used as a year name to designate that year. So instead of numbering the years, they used the name of the official. And what they did was they kept lists of these names for each year. So these were eponymous year names. So the archaeologists spend time finding economic texts or records of these year names. The reason that they have the date of, say, 823 BC for the death of Shalmaneser III is because they only have eponymous year names that allow them to go up to 823 BC. The other eponymous year names are actually missing from the chronology. Now, the basic reason why these eponymous year names are missing is due to civil war in Assyria. During the time of civil war, the merchants didn't know which side to back, and if they pointed at eponymous names during the time of the Civil War, then it would be like a political statement of which party you were supporting. The other thing is that the Assyrians did not want to acknowledge their periods of civil war, so they didn't record eponyms for those years. So what we need to do is we need to look for the periods of civil war in Assyria. So let's talk about the big chunk first. The first period of civil war occurs between the reign of Ashur Nirari, and here's his last eponym, Kala revolts, and the beginning of the reign of Tiglath III. During this whole period of 46 years in between these two kings, so this is the gap right here, 46-year gap. During this whole period, Assyria was racked with civil war. I have actually two phases to this civil war. We don't know who the antagonists were at the first part of the civil war. During the last part of the civil war, we know that it was a king Pul, because Menahem of Israel paid tribute to a king Pul. Okay, now I believe that Pul and Tiglath-Pileser were the same person. Pul was the name of Tiglath-Pileser while the civil war was going on. But Tiglath-Pileser didn't want to have the Assyrian annals acknowledge that there was a civil war in Assyria. He had the records of the civil war expunged, and he had his reign joined to that of the last legitimate king of Assyria, Ashur Nirari V. And there's his last year. So Tiglath-Pileser made himself a direct successor of this king. He wasn't, in fact, a legitimate descendant. He was a usurper who had one side in this Assyrian civil war. And in fact, at the beginning of the civil war, he wasn't even in the army. According to his age, he would have only been 7 years old. But the civil war tore Assyria completely apart for a very long time, and eventually he was able to rise in the ranks of the faction that won the war and become a general Pul. When he was a general Pul, or king of part of Assyria, then he only governed part of Assyria, while the other parts were still in revolt. He was strong enough, however, to make a foray into the northern kingdom and collect tribute. He did not stay, he left. He was just interested in loot and money, because he was still fighting a civil war and had to finance a civil war back in Assyria. He had to pay off his supporters. So that's where the 46 years disappeared to. That leaves us with 6 more years to explain. Okay. The chronologist Christine Tetley proposed that the eponyms dropped out at the end of the reign of Shamshi-Adad V. And that's what I have here in edition 0.72 of this chronology. Christine Tetley dropped out many more than 6 years here, but we only need 6 years to complete the 52 years. I've discovered in recent research that there was a revolt at the beginning, a civil war at the beginning of the reign of Shamshi-Adad V, between his would-be accession year and his 7th year. His brother revolted and took 27 major cities of Assyria into his camp, including Nineveh and other principal cities. So I have an arrow drawn here from these 6 years to over here. These 6 years actually go here now due to new information. And the new information has to do with Babylon over here. And what happened was that Shalmaneser V had to ask the king of Babylon for help. And the king of Babylon drove a very hard bargain and treated Shamshi-Adad as his inferior, and gained all kinds of concessions from him in order to assist him in the civil war. It seems pretty evident that Shamshi-Adad V was the weaker party in the civil war in Assyria. The civil war, according to Assyriologists, lasted 6 or 7 years, so there's exactly the right amount of time to have a period of time in which no eponyms or no year names are given. Either year names were given and they were given by 2 camps and 2 sets of officials, or during the Civil War, no year names were assigned at all. I'm in favor of no year names being assigned at all while the fate of the empire was in limbo. So we actually do have a 6-year civil war to explain the 6 missing eponyms here. Okay, now there are some interesting confirmations. The first is, once we make these 2 adjustments, 6 years in the reign of Shamshi-Adad V and 46 years between Ashur Nirari IV and Tiglath-Pileser, we find some things actually line up in archaeology. The first of these is that Adad Nirari, according to the Tel Rima stela, collected tribute from Jehoash, king name is on the next page, Jehoash of Israel, and he collected that tribute in his 5th year. So in the 5th year of Adad Nirari V, which would correspond to the co-regency, which was 2 years or 3 years of Jehoash, is when the tribute was paid. So this lines up. It does not line up in Tetley's chronology. We don't mention Josephus or Ashur because they had no knowledge of Assyrian chronology or the archaeology. But it doesn't line up in Tetley's chronology to the 5th year. The second point we need to make is that the Assyriologists date the 9th or 10th year of Ashur Dan in 763 BC. So we put 763 BC in right there. Okay, that's the Assyriological date for the 9th year of Ashur Dan, in which the eponym list records an eclipse. Okay, if we follow the biblical chronology down from the usurpation of Athaliah and the accession of Jehu in 893 BC, and we take the Assyrian chronology at face value with its eponyms, and we put the 6 years in here for this revolt, then what happens is that the 9th year of Ashur Dan lands exactly on a solar eclipse in 809 BC. Now, there was a solar eclipse in 763 BC, but as we all know, chronology is racked by the problem of astronomical synchronisms that are misidentified, because solar eclipses repeat, lunar eclipses repeat. Eclipse dates are often misidentified, and actually 763 isn't the only date to be associated with the eclipse of this eponym in the 9th year of Ashur Dan, but also there is an eclipse in 809, and indeed even 791 has been proposed as the date for the eclipse. The remarkable thing here is that by only allowing for no eponyms during the revolt in the reign of Shamshi-Adad V, and starting with the biblical chronology date of the usurpation of Athaliah, Jehu's assassination of the northern king, in 893 BC, we can lock the Assyrian chronology down to an eclipse in 809 BC. Now we should notice that the reign of Ashur Dan was the time of the preaching of Jonah, right here. And what was happening in Assyria during this time? Well, we see that we have a continuous string of years after this time labeled revolt, revolt, revolt. And so it's probable that Ashur Dan wasn't king over all of Assyria, and that the country was divided up into competing or warring city-states, with Nineveh and the king of Nineveh being one of those warring city-states. The situation continued right down to the end of Ashur Dan's reign, and we see that Adad Nirari didn't go anywhere. Typically an Assyrian king campaigned against foreign nations, but in the land, speaks of having great domestic problems in Assyria. And eventually, Adad Nirari V's reign breaks down into complete and total civil war, which opens up the period of 46 years for which no eponyms were recorded. Okay, in this last section, I want to summarize the reconstruction of Assyrian chronology, starting with the established biblical chronology, which is how the issue should have been approached in the first place, rather than approaching it from the point of view of Thiele and his cohorts, of assuming that Assyrian chronology is right, and then trying to twist biblical chronology into a pretzel to fit it. So what we're going to do is we're going to see how easily Assyrian chronology will yield to the opposite approach, to being conformed to the biblical chronology. Well, we see here the accepted beginning of the reign of Tiglath-Pileser in 745 BC, and we see here the end of the 46 years missing from Assyrian chronology. The first observation we want to make is that Menahem of Israel paid tribute to Tiglath-Pileser, but according to the biblical chronology, this was before Tiglath-Pileser officially came to the throne. So the best theory here is that under the name of Pul, before he became Tiglath-Pileser, a general Pul, or during a civil war, he collected tribute from Menahem of Israel. That all the 46 years in this section are missing in one continuous string is established by our next point, and that is the reigns of Adad Nirari the reign of Ashur Dan and the reign of Shalmaneser IV are tied together by the career of a general Shamshi-ilu, whose career lasted 29 years, from the reign of Shalmaneser IV to the reign of Ashur Nirari, at the end of the gray column here. That argues eloquently that the missing eponyms all occur after the end of the reign of Ashur Nirari V, and that the gap ensues between Ashur Nirari V and Tiglath-Pileser and not elsewhere. We have an extremely high confidence benchmark with the eclipse of Ashur Dan, not in 763, the traditional date, but in 809 BC. Going upwards in Assyrian history, we have a high confidence benchmark between the 5th year of Adad Nirari, this would be Adad Nirari III, and Jehoash of Israel, since he paid tribute when this king went west on a campaign in his 5th year. That's a high confidence benchmark. And then we have the other high confidence benchmark in the reign of Shalmaneser III, when Jehu paid tribute to him, traditionally 841 according to the Assyriologists. Actually, this was in 893 according to the biblical chronology. And we have another high confidence benchmark between the 6th year of Shalmaneser here, because he was involved in the Battle of Karkar, in the 22nd year of Ahab. Ahab contributed 2,000 chariots and 10,000 troops, according to the archaeological record. For the remaining 6 eponyms, this is not what I would call a high confidence or extremely high confidence, but I would call it the likeliest place for the missing 6 eponyms. The remaining 6 eponyms is in the first part of the reign of Shamshi-Adad V. And the reason for this was because this is the weakest point in Assyrian history that lies between our known high confidence points. So this is the likeliest place for the 6 eponyms to have disappeared from history or not to have been recorded in the first place. So this allows us to reconstruct the Assyrian history pretty accurately with a pretty good confidence level, because we have enough anchor points to biblical chronology to guess at the wiggle places in between.